So you were back with my uncle Leonard and Rosalind Jefferies. They are a part of my life history, my love for Africa, my love for myself, first of all. And this is where, as I've been trying to tell you guys since we've come to this coronavirus, God is stopping you to tell you that you need to learn who you are. Put you in your place. You're staying at home, but don't waste that time at home. This is the time for you to introduce yourself to yourself, your spirit, your soul, your culture. And so I come to sit at the feet of the masters and my family so that I do not forget, so my daughter does not forget, so that we live far beyond this coronavirus, but our history shall not stop. So I'm going to go back to the experts and slide myself back over here.
Well, certainly, it's clear that we're talking about an intergenerational relationship that the grandmothers and the great-grandfathers have had an influence on us. And unfortunately, we don't know the history so that we do not weave them in. But Rosalind and I have to. One of our great things was her father, and my grandfather were Masons.
Yeah, and my grandfather. They were
So that was a big
they were there
thing.
the same lodge.
Right, and so that gave him his manhood space, because when you're in larger society and you're a black man, there's a tendency to diminish you.
Yeah.
When you get into these brotherhoods and sisterhoods, that elevates you, and you can think beyond yourself.
And see, that's what sometimes people aren't able. Like, I'm an AKA. People feel like, oh, can you be religious and be in a sorority? Oh, that's Greek. The sisterhood, the brotherhood from the Masons back before, when we had the Masons, the Eastern Stars. You know, my grandma was an Eastern Star.
My mother was Eastern
Star. You know, so
and that was the contribution of African peoples, that you are more than an individual.
Yes,
you're more than a couple. You're more than a family, and so the group relationship and organizing around is a significant thing.
Mm-hmm.
And but now, when you can get your little individual cell phone, you become an individual, and the communication with the community and your communal family is lost. So we have to reaffirm that that's something that's necessary. That communal, intergenerational thing is necessary. Robeson son, for me, I found downstairs in these archives an envelope. I said, "What is this? Rutgers University?" I opened it up, and it was my acceptance to Rutgers University as an undergrad. All of these schools in the Ivy League were trying to get me, Penn and whatnot, was trying to get me to be a part of the integration of these schools. And so when I saw I was interested in Rutgers because Robeson had gone.
Right.
And but when I got accepted to Lafayette College, even though the Robeson, Rutgers, and I have the official acceptance, I went to Lafayette College because of the two black students at Lafayette College. One of them was a childhood friend of mine who we used to be on the stoops doing our doo-wop and playing stickball and the rest. So instead of me choosing Prestige, Colgate, that's where Adam Clayton Powell Jr. went, Brown University, all these schools that I said yes, I went where I wanted to have some camaraderie, some African love and affection. So we did find out, I just did find downstairs, it was amazing, a photo that included Sonny Catino, who I grew up with because he lived next door. Our mothers were friends through the family relationship of the Browners and Jefferies and all that. And so the question was, who was going to kick out of the womb first? And I was enjoying myself kicking around. And I had known I didn't want to come out at all, but then circumstances forced me to make a move. But I had such a big head, they had to get the forceps and pull me out.
Pull you out.
But finally, I was out I had made my grand entrance, and here I was, born on the day of my grandfather's birth, January the 19th. He was born in 1888, and I was born in 1937. And
my mother's born in January 12th, same year.
okay, and then the Sonny, he finally kicked out 5 or 6 days later. So we lived next door to each other. Our mothers and fathers were the best friends. And so whenever the baby cabbages moved, there was 3 or 4 of them together. And so I found a photo that I didn't know exists the other night. And it is myself, my brother, Sonny Catino, Raymond, one of our best friends, and then Sonny Green in a wheelchair. And it just blew my mind that the creator had said, look, here, you've been trying to get in touch with his family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here's the photo that takes you back to your former relationship. So some of the relationships can be positive, some can be negative. Susan
From Essence?
Robeson worked close with Gil,
Mm-hmm.
but at some point there was a little difficulty there. And at one point, Susan had this beautiful, tall, melanized black boyfriend and a fiance. And he talked like Paul, he could speak like Paul, etc. But I think he wasn't the one that her Jewish mother, wanted in the family. Yeah. So it never occurred.
Now, whose wedding did you do? I remember on the boat. Whose wedding was that? Whose child was that?
That was Gil Noble's.
Gil Noble's. Okay.
Second or third daughter.
Yeah.
And Gil said it's wonderful to get these girls married, but he said it's too much. He said I'm going crazy. He said patent leather gloves, shoes, nothing African. So he said, can you and Rosa do something African for us? And so I said, well, do you want us to participate in the wedding? And he said, yes. And so it was on a yacht down at the yacht club and in New York. And so we came with the stools and with the cloth and the symbols. And the people said, where are you all going? As if we were on the wrong boat. And we said, well, we're a part of the wedding ceremony. And so then they had to make an adjustment. And Reverend Butts officiated, so him and I were very close. So he was glad to have us participate, and he had still has a lot of respect for Rosalind, and he also has a beautiful wife who was one of our students at St. While he was teaching at City, his wife was taking classes, Patricia, and she is a wonderful African spirit, because his job is not easy. And I have a wife that has to deal with all around her husband and then still raise the kids and then still deal with the family. And interesting enough, a friend of ours, Fanny Clark, lives on 100 East 100th Street or something like that in around the corner from Malcolm X. And Reverend Butts grew up across the street. And so to have these connections has made life so meaningful. Fanny Clark was just an extraordinary spirit. She lived to be 90-something, and she was a healer. She had a whole thing of and she knew how to manage money. She's the one that set me on account. Said, no matter what you think you're doing, you're not doing enough. Having a will takes care of your relationship to the state. But with all the stuff that you and Rosin have, you need a trust. And she brought out her book that this white accountant or attorney had showed her, and she had followed that. As a result, she managed property. She had property in Pennsylvania. She had property in New York. She had property in Ghana. So she really lived it and not just talked. And she shared it. We would go into we had a overload with the hotel in Ghana, and we had a trip to go to the hotel, and then they raised the fares on the flight, so we needed 17,000. The people were already going out to the airport, so I rushed down 125th Street, and I got 7,000 out of my account, and then we rushed out to the airport, but we knew we would be short when we got to Ghana. And when we went to Fanny, she said, well, what do you need? I said, well, we need about 5,000. She said, well, that's good. Come on in the big bedroom. And she went into the closet, came out with a wicker basket with $5,000 in it. I said, oh. In other words, the stories that we have are so fantastic.
And tell about Bill Jones.
And then
Talk about Bill Jones.
Now, Aquia, I'm gonna send this to you because we're talking about your dad.
Yes.
What Bill Jones means to us.
Yes, he has. They came. Dr. Bill Jones comes from a family of medical people.
Doctors, yeah.
His father, and I believe on his mother's side there was also a medical, and he has just become one of our own, and it's been so helpful. Now we also reciprocated because when I first met him, he had been through a health crisis, and we bonded with him around that. And so he'll call me tonight. Everything all right? Just to make sure. And so you can tell his sister that he's been doing wonders with his family and the kids, a daughter and son. And of course his wife is staying, helping. And then they have a 4-foot friend, a member of the family. They added another one. Mm. And so Greo and all of them grew up on Hamilton with the mother took care of that swimming pool in the backyard. Mm-hmm. Father was a legendary physician here in Teaneck, Englewood. But whenever I went over to the house and knocked on the door, I got greeted by dum 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 dum, and that was.
Well, Aquia is now a renowned entertainment attorney. She lives in I was just at her house in California. Okay. I think her husband's Jewish too.
Okay.
Lovely man. Right. But she's doing. She's doing.
At college, I was the president of the Jewish fraternity.
And that's why I keep telling people they just don't understand the history. You know, the people. It is necessary for this to keep this fight between blacks and Jews as if there is a differentiation. In fact, it's such a false. It's a false narrative that we allow people to perpetuate that, and we don't even have a part of the conversation.
That's right, and they tried to use that. Even though I grew up with Jews and Italians and Irish from a youngster, we organized our black component, but we called ourselves the Four Musketeers: Leonard Jefferies, Little Lenny, Anthony Serrato, the Italian. His father was a plumber. Michael Jacobson, father, a businessman, and Billy Curran was the poor Irish. His family lived in the back of a shoe store. And but Billy, coming from that poor background, became a vice president of one of the big companies down and off of Military Park. So that poor Irishman, and we were tight, but we had a little problem because coming up through the images of were the ball players, the baseball players, Jackie Robinson, and then in basketball you got Bill Russell and people getting into, and then in boxing you had Joe Louis, and so one of the matches I can still remember, Joe Louis was fighting Billy Conn, and Billy Conn was an Irishman. Joe Louis was black, of course. They called him the Brown Bomber. And so as close as I was to Billy Curran, I was rooting for Joe Louis. I raced man early on. But and Michael Jacobson, he lived on 5th Street. I lived on 4th. Anthony Serrato lived on Sussex Avenue across from the school. Now, I was president of the grammar school. There was only a handful of us blacks in there. But when I graduated, and I had to lead them in the Statue of Liberty pledge, give me your tide, your poor, your huddled, masses yearning to be
Even
free,
though
the
we
wretched
never went there.
But now that as I grew up, I found out the real story of the Statue of Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got into high school, I was a leader of the high school. It was a largely Italian high school. And Anthony Serrato wrote on my high school graduation, the first Negro president. And he wasn't talking about the first Negro president of a high school or city. He's talking about the first Negro president of the United States. And so, I have the book back there. And then when I went on to college, the Jewish fraternity rushed me heavily. And they said that we're not rushing you because you're black. We have blacks in our fraternity. In Los Angeles, we have Rayford Johnson. Now, this is the decathlon winner, one of the greatest athletes in the world, the greatest athlete in the world. He was he was a part of their UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA. In fact, there's a picture of me in the 50s receiving a certificate for my work as the president of the Sigma chapter. And he's in the background at the...
What was the fraternity name?
It's Pi Lambda Phi.
Pi Lambda Phi.
Pi Lambda Phi. It was a national Jewish fraternity formed in the 1890s as a response to Jewish
Now, this is a deja vu, because years ago, I asked you that same exact question, and I have it, but it's on a VHS.
Oh, okay.
So I'm putting together some of these breaks in between.
So here's what happened was, Lafayette does not have enough space in there in the college for a freshman. So they have you come a week early. You're rushed before you get into the school, before classroom. So, but some kids don't want a fraternity, but they still have to go through the process. And so, and I like to play basketball. So there was a 2-on-2 game in the gym. And I said, well, look, we're standing on the sides of the rest. Can't we play at least 3-on-3 or maybe a full 5-on-5? So they made it 3-on-3. So they had me, and I came out on the court. So the rumor got around that there's a scholar athlete that has come to Lafayette. Other people rushing me. So the Jewish community came, faculty said, we're not rushing you because you're black. We got blacks in our fraternity. We are pledging Jimmy Brown at Syracuse, the greatest football player. And they pledged Rayford Johnson in UCLA. And so they really put me in some heavy categories. And I didn't fail them. I did, I was...
I know you did your thing.
And they haven't failed me either, because when the attack came and people said he was a Jewish fraternity in college, and the president and the vice president, they put him up as the freshman.
You know what day that attack happened on? You remember? It was my birthday, July 20th.
Yes, that's right.
I may not have seen you in a long time. I'll forget anything.
But the interesting thing was they wanted to go after my Jewish fraternity brothers. And they asked them, was he as anti-Semitic then as he is now? And they picked the right one. They got Michael Moscow, Paterson, New Jersey. He lived on the east side, went to East Side High School. And they asked Michael, and Dr. Moscow, and he said, he was our leader. He was the best of us. That ended them ever trying to get to any of my Jewish fraternity brothers, because Michael Moscow was the head of the Chicago Federal Reserve, the largest and most important one after Greenspan heading the one in New York. And once Mike could make that clear statement, they did not want to put that out going across the airways because I'm supposed to be the worst thing in the history of the world. And here's this very powerful, one of the most powerful Jewish members of the New York of the American community standing up without flinching. So it's been like that. There's the support when the curriculum thing happened in the 80s. Jewish scholars sent me the books of the Jewish involvement in Hollywood, the Jewish involvement with the mob, the Jewish involvement with enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
I have 53 books on the Jewish involvement with enslavement. Most of the books written by Jews themselves.
And that's the thing. History, as I say, to a lot of those who I try to teach, when you can't pick and choose history. You have to also deal with the Africans who sold Africans into slavery off the continent. White folks just didn't roll up on the continent and start snatching black people off of the continent. We have to understand that we have a part to play in it, but I don't know if they foresaw the magnitude of the treatment. I don't think that they understood that because there was always indigenous.
Africans were involved, but it was not their system.
Right.
It was a system conceived by the Europeans, put in place by the Europeans, sustained by the Europeans, not for a weekend, not for a month, not for a year, but for hundreds of years.
And that's how they planned it out.
400 years.
400.
And Africans were sucked into it just like we got Africans selling each other drugs on the streets. It's today. It's the system. But when you realize the magnitude of the system, I call it the four-way system of domination, destruction, and death. They planned in Amsterdam and in Nantes in France and Bordeaux, in Copenhagen, and they planned to be a part of this economics. They put up the slaving companies, the Dutch West Indian Company, the Swedish Africa Company, the Brandenburg German Company, the Royal Company of Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. And so everybody wanted a piece of it. Africans had no ships to take anybody across the ocean. Africans had no plantations to work in the. So even though Africans were involved and could not work without them, it was the European system.
Yes.
A four-way profit system. And then people say, four-way, no. Yes, they had industry was created in cities like Manchester and whatnot in England and Amsterdam, because industries had the fitting out of the ships and getting products to sell. And you had to have something going down the coast of Africa. The Africans wanted what you had. You had some fancy rugs, some fancy jewelry, and so the Africans said, well, we got enough gold here. Here, you take a gold bar. They said, you got any more of them? Yeah, we got one over here. You get. And so, in other words, the systems analysis is what is necessary.
Right.
And everybody's hands is bloody.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. It's not if you stop the blame game and just speak the truth, everybody had a part to play. It's just that we now perpetuate it on ourselves.
Right.
And that's where...
So we have to make the adjustment now. Rosalind, sometimes her memory is...
Yeah, Africans had plantations, but it was not cash crops for materialism
Well, you're hitting a
and
good...
exploitation.
You're hitting a good point, and I left it out.
So that's what it was.
Africans
not for
were
exploitation.
As a
Explain
part
it to
of the
them.
system.
Did I knock
That
your
was
bottle
just,
over? Okay. I get it. I have it.
But Africans never dehumanized other Africans. And that this is important to understand. Africans operate around such a heavy spiritual component to their life that they may have a war with you and conquer you and get some captives. But they don't mess with your ancestors. Spirit is not to be met. In other words, we may be able to beat you by throwing a few spears at you, but we're not going to come and take your land because it's too saturated with African spiritual power. So Africans may have had captives, but they did not dehumanize their captives like the Europeans did, and the example would be the Native Americans. They're wiped out, millions of them wiped out, dehumanized.
After coronavirus, half of the Navajo Nation will be gone.
That's what I heard them pleading for some help.
You know who's sending the money? Irish, because the Navajos sent money to them during that famine.
During the famine, yes.
Not American.
Right.
Ireland is sending money over here to help to keep the Navajo Nation.
So the question of having a captive and having somebody who's been dehumanized to the level of property, and in the African tradition, Sundiata was a captive by one aspect of those empires in the Mali, Ghana, and Songhai. But Sundiata, the captive, rose to be the king. That ain't gonna happen in the European process of domination, destruction, and death. You are property. That means you lose your humanity. But fortunately, people are getting wiser and beginning to understand these things. Now, Roz and I had a few mentors, and one of them was a fellow called Elliot Skinner, Trinidadian, and I ran across his book with this beautiful cover on it with the Kente cloth. And so as we pulled it together, and then I have up here Dr. James H. Robinson, Alex Haley, Frank Boas, German Jew, 1930, he taught at Columbia. He helped to lay the foundations for anthropology, Frank Boas. I didn't realize he was a German Jew, but I got this little notation there. Now, when you open it up, oh, wow. Dr. James Robinson, Alex Haley, Frank Boas, German Jew, 1930, he was at Columbia. And I'm at Columbia now, so that's why that was significant. Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, Zora Neale Hurston,
Wow.
Alice Walker, Elliot Skinner, Emmanuel Wallerstein, Gray Cowan, my advisor. And so when you open it up, and I didn't realize that Elliot Skinner had signed it.
Oh, you know, I gotta get.
And that's why this collection becomes special and valuable. To lend, those of us who have trained you await your contribution to the fight. Personally, I am counting upon you, Elliot Skinner.
Now that is quite.
And he saved me. He saved me at the defense of my dissertation. Because one of these, somehow the white folks just get jealous of young black men. And Emmanuel Wallerstein tried to destroy me. You have 5 professors defending your dissertation. He's tried to destroy me in the defense of the dissertation. But the first 2 people who tested me was the British professor and the French professor. And when we took a break after that, we went into the bathroom to take a wee-wee. So I'm doing my wee-wee, and one is on one side and one is on the other side. And both of them say, you did very well. And so
that's quite a place to decide
that meant I had passed.
Oh, okay.
Because they were the question mark. 2 of them was my advisor, Gray Cowan. I had passed. Elliot Skinner, the only black professor I ever had, he was on. So I knew I had passed. So when Wallerstein came with his mess to try to destroy me, I was ready for him. And I told him, I said, I did not cover that question in my research. I was not dealing with Southern Africa. I was dealing with West Africa, French Africa. I mean, I was just saying, instead of, oh my God, I'm going to miss this kid, no. Once I knew that I had passed from the beginning, I was ready to kick ass.
That's right.
And Wallerstein, to the end, has been a nemesis. That's unfortunate. But Gray Cowan told the Rockefeller Foundation that Jefferies has the potential of being a national asset because he can move around the world into these nations and meet these professors. So this is beautiful to have Elliot.
So I have to have that these pictures so that they don't think that I'm being unhealthy, but taking the photos without my face covering. I'm far away enough so I can put it in.
And this one is the vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, a thought, not an afterthought. An action, not a reaction. And it says, Uncle Lenny, 96 Schumacher,
Oh.
Teaneck, New Jersey.
Oh, am I not getting this? Okay, there it is.
And,
Because I got it in my
and it's the Black Panther. Move on over or I'll move over you. By Hassan Kwame Jefferies. And his mother and father gave him the name Hassan. I said, wait a minute, we need to give an African name in there. So it was Kwame Nkrumah. And his older brother was Hakeem. And then I said, no, we got to give him an African name. So I said Sekou. So he is named.
He has my name.
Oh, okay. But then my brother said, did you get the book? Did you get the book? I said, yeah. And he said, did you go to the front of the book? I said, yeah. And he recognizes everybody in his, in acknowledgments. No, my brother said, this is the acknowledgement. And of course, he gives an extensive acknowledgement. In acknowledgement of his PhD dissertation, he acknowledged somebody at the end. And that somebody that he thanked at the end was Nubia.
Wow.
Nubia was his cat that kept him, accompanied him at Morehouse.
Like, whoa.
Morehouse. And then he brought Nubia. He wasn't going to abandon Nubia when he went on to Duke to get his PhD. He brought Nubia up to the Big Apple, to Brooklyn. And Nubia finished out her days in glory. And I asked my brother, I said, Jeff, how did she die? He said, she died in my arms. I mean, they made that Nubia a part of the family. Also, you remember when we went over there. Now, but Jeff says, go further to the front. And so we go past the abbreviations, and then there's the content, and then to Uncle Lenny.
Oh,
for everything.
You can't even make this stuff up.
To Uncle Lenny for everything. And we took him and his brother to Africa when they were 12 and 13 with my mother, when we took 1,000 people in 87. Now, the Black Panther, before there was a Black Panther in Oakland, Bloody Lounge, June 17th, a couple days before Rosalind's birthday.
I trust we both can. Oh, you June 17th. Mine is
June 24th.
24th, because we're both canceled, because mine is July 20th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To Uncle Lenny and Aunt Rosalind, thank you for all of your support, love and support over the years, and especially for lighting the way for my career. None of my professional accomplishments would have been possible without your example. With love for the people, Hassan.
Oh.
Don't get any better than that.
Yeah.
And then this Black Panther, we were up in the Bay Area in Oakland, but the Black Panther in Lowndes County comes in before they adopt this symbol up in Oakland. So I'm saying there's a lot we need to.
There's a lot of history in our family that needs to be chronologized. So we're
going to end it with this.
Oh, this is what we.
This is the coup de grace in French. This is the crowning glory. And there he is, smiling like a Chessy cat, happy as he can be. Alex Haley. And he is really, look at those youngsters around him. This one looks like so many youngsters in Africa that Rosalind and I met. In every different family, there was some little youngster like that. Look at this one. She's more mature, so she's sitting next to Alex. And then and above him is Benta Kente. Benta Kente.
And now we have a photograph of us and Bente Kente
Kente.
up in Juforé.
That's right.
Alex Haley's village.
Right. So we can take this picture. I was here. When this picture was
When
being
we were
taken
young.
in Ebony, I was there. I was here with him. I had the grant.
I
Because
sat next to
Alex
him
did
on a
not
trip to
speak
Sierra
French.
Leone. And I didn't, he was between, well, I was on this side, I was in first class. There's a white woman sitting next to me, but I didn't even realize it was him.
Right.
So he signed her ticket, then he gave it to me, and I was like, and she signed it to her, and then she gave it to me because I was the only other black person in first class.
Yes. What were you saying, Rosalind?
Here's Auntie Ross.
Oh, I was just saying that
Well,
Alex did not speak French.
Yes.
And Alex was not a real Africanist to understand things about the culture of Africa. He was a great journalist, and he was curious and was drawn with a calling to Africa.
Right.
But once you get to Africa, then Leonard was the one to translate because the major language was French, and then you had these various tongues that the individuals spoke as they did their various dances from the various regions that comprised Juforé. So that French, Leonard had already known because he had lived in Switzerland. Before I met Leonard, he had gone to Switzerland to study at the university there. And if you're going to do your studies in French, that's how he had presidential French. And so he also made little friends with the people in the village, so that he had these little Swiss people from the villages that taught him how to ski down the Alps. So he came with these stories to me about Monsieur Lenoir.
A ski weekend for $5. And so here we are going up into the mountains for the ski weekend. And to save money on our ticket, the Swiss guys would go up on their scooters. And the way it was, the person driving, you get a second person behind them holding on, and then we would be scooting up into the mountains on the scooter. But they knew how to ski. I was with others taking lessons. And so as I was getting my ski lessons together, here comes a little pisser about this high, skiing out to me. And he's looking up in utter amazement. And he says to me, "Bonjour, Monsieur Noir." And I'm looking down at him and I said, "Bonjour, petit," little one. And then he looks up at me and he says, "Vous êtes Africain? Are you African?" So I looked down at the little picture and I said, "No, je ne suis pas africain. Je suis américain." "Vous êtes American? Il y a des Noirs en Amérique? There's blacks in America?" I said, "Oui, nous sommes 25,000. We're 25 million. And he was utterly flabbergasted. And so here I am trying to learn to ski. And here I got to deal with the little person. So I told him, I said, I'll have to, I didn't tell him goodbye, but I said, I'll have to concentrate on my skiing. So he looks at me, and then he doesn't say goodbye, but he zips off. The next thing I know, here comes 7 or 8 people on skis. Grandma, mama, daddy, grandpa, brothers and sisters. All of them came out to meet Monsieur Noir, Mr. Black. So after they greet me and then they go back, then he stays with me to help me in skiing. And when I'm making a mistake, this little guy comes out, Monsieur Noir, ne fais pas comme ça. Mr. Black, don't do like that. If you want to stop yourself, il faut freiner. You got to brake. If you want to slow down, then, he's telling me how I got to use my knees and stuff. So this little guy helped me get my little skiing together. But at the end of the weekend, if you're not prepared to go up and make the run down,
Right.
then
You start with the rabbit hop.
that's right. You haven't done anything. So here I am, up on the lift, ready to make my shoot down. Just like when I played semi-pro baseball. How my brother and I, these big 6'5" Negroes like Satchel Paige throwing the ball. I don't know how we stood up there in the semi-pro, but we did.
Satchel Paige?
So, in other words, Negroes
yes, in their height.
big, yes, and they're falling off the mound and
Yes.
throwing a ball, and we just got and no helmets and nothing. But here I am up at the top of the ski thing, making my run down. Now, you can come running down, but if you come zipping down, you better wind up on your feet. Otherwise, you'll crash into the whole stand there. Everybody's there. So I come down, do my little turnaround, and don't fall down, and I'm standing up. And I heard the little pisser yell out to his mom, Maman, regarde, Monsieur Noir, il a fait de progrès. Mama, look at Mr. Black. He done made some progress. And see, when you have those type of experiences, they don't leave you. So I enjoyed Switzerland and the skiing. Same thing with him. This was a special spirit coming to us. He was the white sheep of his family. Everybody else was successful except him. His father taught at Ithaca College. His mother taught at the high school. His brother was a lawyer. He wanted to be a part of the Nixon administration, and his other brother was an engineer. Alex did not complete college. At the second year, he went into the Coast Guard and was in there for 20 years. So he was a man without an academic credential. But because he was not tied up with the academic credentials, right. He was able to be prepared to do what he did in terms of roots.
Right.
And have the patience and wait for years for anything to happen. And so by the time when he's in Jufere here, the first time he went with, and a fellow named Bakary Sadiebi became the person who took him to the Greo and the rest of that. But when we got the $500,000 grant in 72 or 71, we got part of it 71, then we got the other part 72. I paid for Pat. I paid for his Patricia, his secretary. His childhood buddy, I put him on the payroll, George Sims. Bakary Sadiebi, who was the archivist for the Gambia, he was on Alex's payroll and sent him report about the Gambia and the village. And he also sent me a separate report for the Kente Project of Black Family History. So luckily, I have all of this. And San Jose Foundation had to keep a record of everything. And
I'm thinking, you have to get a hold to Hakeem while he's in Washington. That's why I was just telling you you need to get to Washington. Some of this, the history, I don't know if you've had a chance to get to the African American Museum yet.
We were a part of it.
So this is where this should be. This is where the world should be able to see it. I mean, I know that to put it in a school, it'd be wonderful as an educational tool. But the world needs to see the culmination of the two of you and what you have contributed to this country. To this, not to just New Jersey, not just to your nieces and nephews and at the, at City College, what you have contributed to this country, the history and the making of this country. So many people have sat at your feet and have gone
right.
into careers.
So you're right. So I know where you're going on that. But the way Roz and I look at it, we had a special mission. We came together. We sustained it. We have been, in essence, Pan-African bridges over troubled African waters. I've been able to do it politically and economically. Rosalind's been able to do it culturally. And she's been able to do it within the Black church.
She was just explaining that.
And so it will make sure that something happens at that library, because Lonnie Bunch, he was Rosalind knew him from the black organization. What was the artist? Rosalind, Lonnie Bunch.
Yeah.
In other words, and then one of my goddaughters, Joy Kennard, and I'll try to get a copy of your book. I just read it last night. She has our conversations. She went into the files of Crossroads. So,
Oh God, I had so many of those tapes over the years, and I just didn't have them because I remember because you used to sell the tapes after each.
Yes. But one of our goddaughters, Dr. Joy, and she's a good friend of Dr. Ida. In fact, Joy's, we told her, you don't know your father. He helped to birth you, but we lived with him. He was my roommate before we got married in New York. He was my roommate for a couple of years. And then he got married November the 10th, 1964.
And he was in our marriage.
And we were in his wedding. And then 2 weeks later, we got married in Morningside Heights. And him and his wife was at our wedding. So I was telling Joy that you have to interview us if you really want to get a taste of your father.
And then Joy has recently gotten a position to be the head of George Washington Carver's Archives at Tuskegee Institute, the museum, because she was into museum studies through the park commissions.
Right. She didn't get married, although she said she met Hassan and he's a cutie. She said, I wish he wasn't married, because they sent her out to Ohio, and she was head of Wilberforce. First, she was in Washington, and she was Mary McLeod Bethune and the founder of the association. She was involved in the building.
Going to the ladies' room.
Right. But she actually got promoted. They took her out of Washington, but she said it wasn't a challenge for her. She was ready to take the challenge. And so she helped to set up Colonel Young in Wilberforce. And then just recently, she said that, and my brother and I went out there last year. It was fantastic. And and Hassan came from Columbus, where he is, at Ohio State. And she told me most recently that she has been moved. I said, my brother and I was hoping to come back out there. But of course, with the disease now, there ain't nobody doing no heavy traveling. But she said that she's been moved to Tuskegee. So I said, oh, wow. I said, but you're just getting your stuff and you got everything set up in Ohio. She said, yes, Uncle Lenny, but it's a promotion.
Yeah.
And so she's in charge of Tuskegee Institute, the George Washington Carver Center, and the Tuskegee Airmen.
Now I have a because of my daughter being in aviation. She has I have a picture with her and the last three. Well, when she first started at Embry-Riddle, there was 4. So there's a picture of us bringing out the last 4 original Tuskegee Airmen.
Wow. And you know, our brothers, Percy Sutton was a Tuskegee Airman, and so was Roscoe Brown here in New York. He was head of the Bronx Community College. So in order to finance the evaluation of what we have here, 2 storage,
I'm gonna take this off on this.
extra storage